Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I have a very exciting guest today who is going to be talking to us all about the wonderful world of freelancing, an endeavor that is both free and lancing. So it harkens back to the days of Knights of the Round Table, I believe. In any case, I have Tim Noetzel with me today. Please, Tim, introduce yourself to my channel of viewers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Harry. So I have been a full stack developer and UX designer professionally for about 14 years. So honestly, it feels like I've been doing it my whole life. Built my first website when I was 10 and was kind of hooked ever since. And over the last 5 years, I've also been freelancing, first as a side hustle, and for the last 2.5 years full time. And recently also started coaching developers on how to go freelance. So excited to be here and talk a little bit about the craft.
Yes, it is exactly that second half that I think we're going to explore to get a little sneak preview of the wisdom, experience, and knowledge that you have to share. I would be remiss to not mention that you also have a course where you also teach these things in a more focused, probably optimal method than just this channel.
Yeah, so I've got a free course, that's all about how to become a freelance developer. So, for you, seasoned and even new developers out there, there's quite a bit of information. Kind of covers everything from whether you should even consider freelancing to how much you can make to all the things you need to know around sales and marketing and contracts, that kind of stuff to get you in shape to get started.
Yeah, and I'm very special because I get a little nice little freebie, as you all do, who's watching this, obviously. So I'm very appreciative of it, Tim. I know that earlier on in my career, I definitely thought more about doing freelancing when I had bundles of energy, and now I'm old and I walk with a cane and I can barely walk outside, so I don't even think about it. But it's still a curiosity that I always entertain with. So enough gibber gabber, because I know people always on YouTube are like, get to the point. The point is this interview. Uh, so I guess the first question to start off with, to like set the stage, because all the world's a stage if you are into theater. God, all the just little, I just have to throw these things in here. I don't know what it is. Just gotta throw in these little references to make sure that people know that I know things. But the first question to set the stage is what, and this is a simple question, but I think it's important. What is freelancing?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think to put it simply, at least in my mind, freelancing is essentially being a gun for hire, right? So you are taking your craft, in this case, development, and farming it out to a number of different companies or clients, right? So rather than just working for one company, you are working for a number of them. And everything beyond that, there's actually quite a bit of flexibility in terms of how you do it and how you price and who you work for, whether you work remotely, whether you go into an office, whether you have one client, whether you have dozens or hundreds, how much time you have, whether you bill hourly or by the project or on retainer. But really, it's just about a slightly different relationship where you're not an employee, and you get a whole lot more autonomy and control over your life.
Yeah, that was very well said. Yeah, it's one of those questions that seems like an easy answer, and you literally just scratch the surface, and there's just a well of choices to just kind of dissect. I like the gun for hire metaphor for sure. But yeah, it's definitely a different way of going about your day job when your day job is, um, I guess, not just one place. Yeah, and
Right.
that's the whole free and freelance, I guess. Um, so I guess, following up on that, is there a particular type of person that would do freelance as opposed to somebody that wouldn't want to do freelance?
Yeah, I think there are probably a couple of different types of people who are ideally suited to freelance. And I'll start by sharing a little bit of my own story and what drew me to freelance. Like I said, I had been working full time for mostly tech startups for a long time. had run teams, had worked on teams, and certainly there was a lot I enjoyed about it. But after a decade of doing it for other folks, I kind of realized I kept feeling like sort of a square peg in a round hole. And I knew I wanted to do something on my own, and I had run my own startup in the past, which we had sold. And starting another startup was not something I wanted to do because it's just ridiculously exhausting, and it's a whole lifestyle choice, right?
You're giving your own life to make the life of a company.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I knew I wanted to do something, but I was like, all right, I don't want to do another startup. And I was also like a little bit afraid of freelancing. I was like, well, if I do this, like, what happens if I don't make enough money? I'm also, like many developers out there, I'm a bit of an introvert. So, this fear of like, am I going to suck at sales and marketing? Am I going to have to spend all of my time doing sales and marketing?
Right. That's a
But
big
finally,
thing. That's a big thing with freelancing is all of a sudden you're not just an engineer.
right, right.
Yeah.
There's definitely another couple of hats that you've got to wear, and a few things that you've got to pick up. But I finally kind of realized that like I was tired of trying to, change who I was and what I really wanted.
Mm.
And I really just kind of had to, embrace my desire to go do this. And, so I think that's, the first thing I'll say is if you're feeling like you're kind of a square peg and you're constantly trying to fit yourself into the round hole that is like tech startups or other companies, it may be time to consider freelancing. I also think there's a couple of other things that make people ideally suited to be freelancers. I think first of all, you've got to have at least enough experience, or know how in terms of like figuring out how to learn things rapidly in order to
Mm.
succeed. So I don't think you have to be an expert and in like any specific language. It's not like you have to have been doing it for 10 years, but you probably want to have been in the workplace for at least a year or two, right? But even if you just know HTML and CSS for the sake of argument, right, you can make it as a freelancer. And so you need to know enough, and you need to know how to learn, but you don't have to be an expert. And I think there's a couple of other things that can be helpful, like a willingness to experiment,
Mm.
and a willingness to have one-on-one conversations with people. But beyond those things, I honestly truly believe that anyone can be a freelancer and succeed at it. And it's really just a matter of learning the ropes. And what I found was that, quite honestly, most of that fear was totally unfounded. Right. When I started freelancing, it really started to feel like just this like obvious next step that I couldn't believe I had been dragging my feet so long. It sort of started to feel easy and natural, which isn't to say like any other job, it's not stressful at times, but
Mm.
I figured it out. And I think like most developers, in that I like solving problems. And if you treat it that way, it actually becomes pretty easy, right? It's about learning what the variables are and kind of plugging them in.
Interesting. Yeah, I like what you said about how it's not necessarily your years of experience technically that set you up for success as a freelancer, but more so your capacity to essentially pull yourself up by your bootstraps, given some unknown situation. You might know React, you get hired to do a React native job, and it might not be uh, your lingua franca, but it's still within the ballpark. But um, there's some openness to the unknown and some braveness to the fear to try some things. And you should be honest with somebody that you don't know it offhand, right? You're not going to just say, "Yeah, I can do it," because it's the same thing. But also not being afraid to give it a good old fashioned try.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And at least I've found, roughly speaking, clients will kind of fall into two buckets. there'll be the ones where you're working with someone who's like your primary point of contact isn't technical at all. And with those folks, they just want to know that you can figure it out, and solve the business problem, right? Like they're not hiring you because you're, this programmer who's had 20 years of experience in some language, right? Like, I mean, especially like you mentioned React, right? Like hasn't been around for 20 years.
Right.
Neither
Run the other way if
has.
they ask for that.
Right. Like they honestly don't care about that. They want to know that the solution that you build is going to move their business forward, right? Is it like going to increase sales or decrease costs or whatever it is they're really hiring you to do? And then, there's the other kind of type of client persona where the person you're working with is also technical, right? And then they're a developer and they get it, right? So, would it be lovely to have someone who's spent 3 years doing React Native? Maybe. But like they care a lot more about whether you're fundamentally a good developer. And if you've got some React experience, you'll be able to figure out React Native, right? And they're going to understand, like, you ship something and then you test it and they test it and there's a couple of bugs and they get fixed. So honestly, like the challenges with freelancing have a lot less to do with the development portion of it. As long as you've got, a couple of years under your belt, a lot more to do with how do you find clients, how do you close deals, and how do you set yourself up for success?
So speaking of that, what a great segue. How do you find clients?
Yeah, so I think I'm actually going to answer almost the inverse of that question, if you don't mind, and talk about some common misconceptions. And we already talked about the first one, right? Needing to be like a senior dev who's got tons and tons of experience. But there's tons of misconceptions around sales and marketing, right? A lot of people think that you need to blog, or contribute heavily to open source, or be constantly posting on social media, or that you've got to send spammy emails, or there's all sorts
put out
of
a flame to pull people towards you.
Right. And honestly, like, I'm here to tell you, you don't have to do any of that. I certainly don't, at least. I blog a little.
I don't need to make a YouTube channel to do this?
You don't.
I've wasted the past 2 years of my life.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing, right? Is if you want to do that, right, then great, do it. Like I blog a little bit focused on teaching folks how to freelance. But I don't do any blogging at all to attract my business customers. I don't send out any cold emails. I barely use social media, because I'd rather spend time in meet space with my wife and my friends and my family. But honestly, there's really only 3 things that you need. You need to find a way to meet people with problems. You need to have one-on-one conversations with them, to understand those problems in more depth, and position yourself as the one to solve them. And then once they've bought in, you just need to help them solve them. And once you've done that a couple of times, you will have enough clients to last you for the rest of your life, effectively. Because they're going to keep coming back to you with more business, and they're going to refer other clients to you. So once
please go on.
Really, it's just those first 2 things that folks tend to struggle with, right? Like, how do I meet companies that have problems, right? And then what's the right way to go about having those one-on-one conversations with them?
That's my question. How do you find those companies?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways that I found that work really, really well, but like strategically, the answer is to go hang out where those people are. And I don't necessarily mean doing that like physically, although that can work, when there's not a pandemic on and that kind of thing, right? Luckily we're hopefully getting to the tail end of that. But who knows, at this point. But like, you go to meetups, you can find Slack groups, you can look on LinkedIn. There's tons of different ways to do it, but really what you're looking for is a specific target client, right? Or people who have access to them. So one really good hack is to say like, all right, like who already is a freelancer serving my target client who's complementary to me, right? So if you're a developer, um, think about partnering with designers and marketers, right? Because chances are those freelancers already have access to your target client. If a company is hiring one freelancer, they're more likely to hire more of them. But these people don't do what you do, right? And so they are going to be the first people that your target client turns to ask, hey, do you know someone? And they don't offer it, so they're going to look to farm it out. So that's a great way to do it. An extension of that and kind of the next step is to say, all right, where are there communities of these people, right? Like, where are their marketing communities? Where are their design communities? And honestly, that's been one of the best ways I've found clients. But all of those other methods that I mentioned, a lot of times folks will just post projects on LinkedIn that they've got. Those can work really well. There are lots of high quality freelance job boards, and I want to like differentiate those from kind of the lower quality ones. We can talk about that a bit more in a minute. But those are some great ways to find clients.
Interesting. Yeah. It's almost like a snowball problem. Like, how do you get that first turn to get that initial kernel? But after that, it's harder. Not harder, easier. It's just like when you start your career, the first job in your career, like just working for a company full time, is the hardest. And then you kind of snowball that with your resume.
Right.
But like those, I mean, those are nice little tricks and tips to like figure out at least what ponds to go fishing at. To hopefully get some lure, because I'm sure that for every 100 opportunities you see, there's only, I mean, I don't know what the hit ratio is when you actually get, cold calls that you attempt.
Yeah, well, so that's a great question. And so maybe it'll be helpful if I kind of like compare those channels a little bit, right? So I'd recommend for the folks watching this, who are kind of, have been developers for a couple of years, stay away from places like Fiverr, and Upwork and freelance.com. And the reason is that they're super crowded, and it's kind of a race to the bottom, right? Like, you're really commoditized, you're competing with people, internationally, and in many cases, people who are willing to work for like $5 an hour. So, if you're, if you're, and that's even true on freelancer.com and Upwork, right? Not just Fiverr. And all of those gigs are highly competitive. Like, I was looking through, this was, I don't know, probably about 6 months ago, putting together some course material, and I was looking through Upwork, and the average like hourly rate I found for a React gig was like $25 an hour, which is nothing. And all of the projects I found had somewhere between 25 and 30 bids on them already, right? And so like, that's just like not where you want to be. If you contrast that with something like one of the higher quality job boards like AngelList or We Work Remotely, the hourly rates are a lot higher, right? Because they're companies that understand development and value development. And rather than like 25 bids or pitches, right, it's probably going to be more like 5 or 10. And so that's a little bit more in the right direction. But if you compare that to something where you get an introduction, or somebody posts something on LinkedIn and you're the first person to respond, or one of the first couple of people to respond, right? It's a whole different ballgame, right? Because the competition is much lower, and you have the opportunity to frame what the price should be. And so, rather than going on job boards, and definitely consider the higher quality ones as one avenue. But if you can find ways to meet clients without doing that, you can charge higher rates, and the likelihood that your pitch is going to be accepted goes way up. I'd say something like 80% of my pitches are accepted for new clients, because when I speak to new clients, I'm usually the only one talking to them. And it's not that hard to do, right? You just need to know where these people are hanging out and asking for referrals.
I've never even seen, I don't go on LinkedIn that often, I'll be honest, but I don't, like, people post for freelance gigs on LinkedIn. I had no idea.
Yeah, and there's two ways that people do it. Like, stay away from the job section, or you can check it out, but I would consider it like kind of part and parcel to the sort of high quality jobs board, right? Yeah. But if you just search in like your feed, or just search for people's posts, like, people are posting like, "Hey, I need a React developer." But I think even better is like, find local Slack groups. So like, I'm in Boston. I'm a member of several like Boston marketing Slack groups, right? And they're like local groups for marketers. I'm a member of several Boston design Slack groups. And it helps that I do a little bit of design and a little bit of marketing. But honestly, you can join them just because you're curious about those things. So like, for the vast majority of them, it's not like you need, special bona fides, right?
And like, most of these Slacks have dedicated channels to post jobs.
Yeah.
You're not just in general just saying, "Hey, I need a job," people.
Right. People are posting stuff. And then you just have to raise your hand, right? And a lot of times, it's not even just like, it's not like a normal job posting, right, where you're applying for a full-time job. Like, a lot of times, it's like, can anybody recommend someone who does this? And you can say, look, just raise your hand and say, "Hey, I do it." And oftentimes, like, when I do that, I also say, and if I'm not the right fit, depending on what the gig is, like, I can refer somebody.
You can,
like, I can refer somebody else. But let's talk, right? And I found like close rates for that kind of stuff is usually between 70 and 90%.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And I'm not a sales genius. I like
you are, so
I like to think I've gotten a lot better at it, but I coach a lot of developers on how to do this, and they get similar results, because all you're really doing is that next step after that is having one-on-one conversations, learning about their problems, and positioning yourself as somebody who's capable of solving them. And if you do that, you don't have to sell, right? It doesn't have to be that like, used car salesman kind of thing, right? You're not tricking anybody. You're not being in any way dishonest, right? You're just helping
someone has a need,
figure.
And you have You're helping someone else, and they're helping you out with some cash dollars, no hollers. Very, very illuminating. So I do want to move on to the next question. I don't know if you have anything else you want to say about sales and marketing before we move on to the.
No, I think that covers it in a high level, and obviously I get into way more details in the free course. And if folks have questions, I'm also happy to chat about things in more detail. But I think that covers that like sort of high level strategy.
Yeah, because I could literally talk to you about that for hours, and we'd have to do a live stream, and then you'd have to then charge for it. But you already do that with a course, so yada 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 yada. But people watching, if you have questions, I'm sure Tim will be scouring the comments here. So if you have comments, happily answer. I'm not going to hold them to it, but curiosity.
I'm happy to answer questions. You can also, like when you sign up for the course, you'll get an email from me. And
link will be down somewhere.
If you want to just hit reply, I respond to all of those. So as an actual person, and it won't be some automated thing. Ask questions. I'm happy to answer. Happy to help.
Okay, so let me get to the nice conclusion to this little teaser, because I have so many more questions, but I just want to get the whole breadth of all the outline, right? And then you can kind of go into details elsewhere. But working and living as a freelancer, what is that life like? Like, how do you,
Yeah.
yeah.
So personally, I think it's friggin' fantastic. There's a ton of perks. You get to work where and when you want. And so my wife and I are about to go. Right now, we live in Boston, but we're about to go do the nomad thing for 6 months. So that's great. Honestly, I think even better than that is the level of creative freedom that you get. Right. So like I only work on projects I want to work on. And that's because, once you get a couple of clients under your belt, and so you've got like kind of a baseline like level of stability, which, I think if you get some help and like, sort of learn the ropes quickly, you can do in 2 months. Like once you've done that, you can start picking and choosing your projects, right? And so I'd say half of my clients are really cool e-commerce companies that I really like, and then half of them I'm building React apps or something similar where it's like a relatively new JavaScript based technology working with the Node stack and
Fun new toys.
Yeah, and that's what I like to do, right? And they usually have a bit of design or a bit of like marketing and conversion optimization thrown in because those are things that interest me. And so I think that creative freedom is huge. And I think the last thing that people really love is your income potential goes way up. And like I'm making substantially more than I've ever made before, which is nice. And I'm doing it on my
nomad life. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm doing it on my terms. So I think those are some of the pros. Like anything, there are a few cons as well. I think a big one is that you've got to be willing and able to set boundaries. Otherwise, like you can have clients who will send you a Slack message at 10 p.m. and say something's urgent, right? But there's ways to work around all of that kind of stuff. And it took me a little while to sort of figure it out because no one told me how to do it. But typically
just put your phone in a different room and walk away.
Yeah, you can do that. But what's way better is to like set those expectations at the outset, right? And maybe even in writing, like in the contract, but like I've got certain clients. Yeah, I mean, like I've got certain clients who, in the contract, because they're smaller clients or whatever, it's like, I can get stuff done for you, but like it might take 48 hours type of thing.
Around.
Right. And I've got, some clients who are on retainer, and like if they want to schedule a meeting with me, they've got to use my Calendly link, right? So I'm not constantly going back and forth on scheduling meetings. And I'm also not beholden to like, oh, you just wanted to shove a meeting on my calendar last minute, because like like that might work, I think, for some folks, but for developers in particular, right? Like having dedicated uninterrupted heads down time is huge, right? Like anytime you're like halfway through trying to pick apart somebody else's function and you get interrupted, like you got to start over.
It's like the old XKCD cartoon. You have that whole thought bubble and just goes bing. Yeah,
exactly. So I think those are a couple of the sort of cons, but honestly they're very mitigatable, if you will. And so I think if you're at all curious about freelancing, it's definitely worth trying. Like I love it. And I think a lot of the, like I said, the fears that folks have around, will you make enough, or are you going to have to sell your soul and be like a weird salesman, or like are you gonna have to spend all of your time doing sales and marketing, are just unfounded. Like I'd say I spend less than 30 minutes a week on anything remotely related to sales and marketing. When you're first starting out, I think you gotta spend a little bit more, but it'll be like less than 3 or 4 hours a week. So it's still not like
Work smart, not hard.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. Like if you're spending more time than that on sales and marketing, something's probably wrong.
Yeah.
And so, I really think it's a great lifestyle and it's a great way to live.
Awesome. Awesome. When we were first making this outline, we were like, not gonna have enough time, and we had so many things to talk about. So I'm glad that we got to cover all of them. Any other things you want to mention before I do my fun outro?
Yeah, I think like just a couple of recommendations on how to sort of structure things to make managing multiple clients easier. I'd say we already covered like set clear boundaries. I recommend like doing everything you can to sort of protect your heads down time. Especially if you're a developer, right? Like, so block off time on your calendar to do deep work. And then, automate away the tedious tasks, right? So I use Calendly for scheduling. I use an app called Harvest for invoicing. So I like pretty much never have to worry about invoices. They go out, they get paid. There's plenty of apps for accounting, and you can also hire an accountant. Like I've got an accountant, which is a huge nice thing, but like there's lots of stuff you can automate away to make your life easier. So that's kind of my last recommendation as far as like what you want to be thinking about at a high level if you're just getting started.
Awesome. And then so you have it's a free course? I thought it was a paid course.
Yeah, it's a free course. In addition to that, for folks who want additional help, I also coach people one-on-one. And there's some info about that in the course. And I also like offer to talk to anybody who wants to like just sort of get some high level advice. You can book a free strategy session and get an hour of my time for free. And if you decide you want to get me as a coach, like we can talk about that. If not, no worries. But yeah, the course is free. It's honestly, it's kind of just my way of giving back. I've had the opportunity to get mentored by a number of developers over the course of my career, and I was lucky enough to have a few folks at least point me in the right direction around freelancing, and so I kind of wanted to do the same and gather up a lot of the lessons that I kind of learned the hard way, so that like you sort of have like a compass that helps guide you on your freelance journey. You're not just like off wandering the wilderness like many people feel like they are.
Wonderful. Tim, thank you so much. That was the freestyle way of doing freelance with Tim. I'm just gonna coin that. But everyone, thank you for watching this week's video. That is the video for this week. Again, the link for Tim's free course, because I thought it was paid, and free is always better than paid. No, that's not true. Paid's better than free, but in the case you want something for free, then free is better. The link will be down below, so definitely hit that up. And of course, Tim's available for additional coaching if you want to just pick all his brains like a brain surgeon. Thank you. That's week's episode. Stay happy, stay good. See you in the next one.